So we're going to pick up where we left off in today's discussion with regards to slope. So don't forget, our conversation about slope today already had us come up with the ways of describing slope. So we don't need to get into too much detail about that. Everything you need is already filled in your notes. Don't forget, we read a line from left to right. When it goes up from left to right, it's positive. When it goes down from left to right, it's negative. The two other special types of lines are a horizontal line, which we'll describe as zero slope, and a vertical line we will describe accordingly as undefined slope. But now what I want to do is to get into how we actually place a value on slope so that we can actually calculate it. Because the whole idea is we just don't want to know if that line is positive or negative, but we want to know how steep it is. And the way in which we do that is to create a ratio. This is just a ratio, okay? So that's a ratio of what we call the rise over the run. Now the rise is nothing more than the vertical change. Now when you think about moving vertically, you're either moving up or you're moving down. And likewise, when you're dealing with running, you think more horizontally. So you're either moving to the right or you're moving to the left. And we're going to make use of this in terms of the types of values we place when we actually count the vertical change, the rise, and when we count the horizontal change, the run. Okay, so when we count rise, if we're counting up, we're going to consider that as a positive value, versus if we count down, we're going to consider that a negative value. Likewise, when we count run, if we count to the right, we're going to treat that as a positive value, versus if we count left, we're going to treat that as a negative value. Okay, so this is positive versus this is negative. To the right is positive, to the left is negative. So that's going to give us a value in ratio form. Now as a ratio, we'll reduce it. So we'll always want to make sure we reduce and leave improper if needed. Okay. So that's the only, so being a ratio, the rules for ratios apply. So reduce where you can and leave it as an improper fraction when applicable. And the other important thing here is that the variable we use for slope is right there, is m. So slope is represented by m. Okay? So one more time, slope m is made up of a ratio rise over run. That rise is the counting of vertical change between 2 points on a graph line, over the run is the horizontal change counting between 2 points on a graph line. So to be able to calculate slope, naturally what we're going to need to be able to do first is to graph a line. And the way we're going to do that to start is just simply plot 2 points, the minimum 2 points that we would need, graph the line, and then get right to counting the rise and run accordingly. Okay, so let's plot our points, because that's the first thing we'll want to do. 6, -4 means from the origin, I'm sorry, -6, 4 means I'll go 6 to the left of the origin, 4 right, and I'll go ahead and plot 1 point. 4, -2, starting back at the origin, I'll go 4 to the right, 2 down. I'll plot my second point, and I have my minimum 2 points that I need to go ahead and graph my line. I'm a little bit off, but we're going to work with these points right here, that point and that point. And of course, you'd be using a ruler, so there wouldn't be any question about it. Okay? So we plotted, we graphed the line. Let's quickly describe. Well, for practice, since that line is moving down from left to right, we know it's a negative slope. And that's going to be important because it's also going to remind me that when I go to calculate, I'm going to have a negative value once I'm all done with that ratio representing slope. Okay? So now let's calculate. So to find the slope, don't forget m is equal to my rise over my run. So to be able to count my rise and my run, I'm going to have 2 points, one in which I start from, one in which I finish at. So I start from and count from 1 point, and I finish at, or I count to, the second point. So if I'm going to start with my rise, I'm going to just start. It doesn't matter which of the 2 points you work with, but I'm going to start with the higher of the 2 points. I'm going to count my rise as if this is my starting line 0, and I'm going to count in a downward direction. Notice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now I stop here because I am now in line horizontally with my other point. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And because my rise was in a downward direction, I'm going to treat that as -6. I'm now going to continue from there, and seeing that I'm aligned vertically with that point that I started from, I'm going to start from that location, and I'm going to run horizontally. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm going to run until I hit that point. It looks like I've run 10 spaces. Now notice I ran, or my run was to the right, which means it's positive 10. So we're almost done with calculating our slope. Our slope again is a ratio of the counted rise, which was down 6, so -6, to my counted run to the right 10, so positive 10. And now the last thing I'm going to do is simply to reduce if I can. So as I look at this, I know that I am going to get something that's negative, which I should because I described it as negative. And when I reduce down, this becomes -3/5. So that is what our rise equals for this line. That is what our slope equals for this line. The slope of this line essentially says that every time I count down 3 spaces from my rise and run 5 spaces to the right, I'll actually find another point on the line. If this line were drawn accurately, I would see that. And I could continue that pattern and actually pick up other points along the way. So that's how we're going to go about calculating slope. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to repeat that process on your own for this next problem. So actually, let me just finish what I did here. So one more time, I described my slope as negative. And by the time I was done and reduced, I had a slope of m equals -3/5. You're going to repeat that process by plotting these 2 points, graphing the line, describing the slope, listing on the line as provided, and calculating the slope by counting rise and run. And then we'll continue reviewing in class when we meet again.